Director Ince.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks to Director Caprini and Director Arneson for working on this and helping to put this together. I think as board members of a school district that serves the city of Minneapolis and many tens of thousands of kids, I think it's important for us to be clear about what the potential impact of this amendment will be on our communities. I think the effects will be, at best, non-existent and, at worst, potentially catastrophic for public schools. At the center of this amendment is the removal of the phrase general and uniform system of public schools from the state constitution. And it would be replaced with a right to a quality education as measured against uniform achievement standards as set forth by the state. So the supporters of this amendment think that the right to these uniform achievement standards are better than a general, uniform, and efficient, fully funded public school system. The proposed amendment goes on to say that there needs to be written in the Constitution a right for a parent to choose for their child a private, religious, or home school as an alternative to public education, as if somehow that right were currently at risk. And the amendment also removes language that states the legislature shall make such provisions by taxation or otherwise as will secure a thorough and efficient system of public schools throughout the state. Why does that need to be removed? We don't want to fund our public schools? I mean, clearly, we don't need to take it out of the Constitution, right? We can just underfund them into oblivion anyway, which has been happening. I suppose removing funding from the Constitution would just make the process of defunding our schools easier. So under this amendment, I'm having a lot of trouble trying to envision what our schools will look like in the future. Maybe that's really the goal. Maybe the goal is to create a system where it doesn't really matter what your school looks like or who you serve, as long as you end up meeting these uniform standards. You've met your obligation under the state constitution. Your school, if you could even really still call it that, doesn't have to be integrated. It doesn't have to serve English language learners or kids with disabilities. It doesn't have to promote civic participation or service to the public. Doesn't have to teach about the history of racism or teach about sexual health or have an anti-bullying policy. It just has to meet these uniform standards as set forth by the state. And uniform standards can also be known as standardized test results for anybody that's keeping track at home. And I guarantee that those uniform achievement standards as set forth by our friends over at the state capitol, who we have to beg and plead with every year to get more funds, those standards are not going to be in the best interest of our kids and our school communities here in Minneapolis. We know that bias in standardized testing has always, since the origin of testing, been the basis for racist policies. I say bias, of course, as though a uniform achievement standard could possibly not be biased, but we know, and as I teach my students, bias is inevitable in any human endeavor. The question is really who's biased and how strong. Originally, of course, testing was used to support racist eugenics and sterilization policies. Now, of course, people use it to devalue entire communities, schools, and districts. For decades now, because we in Minneapolis public schools serve those most in need, our schools are called bad or failing. Our staff and our teachers and our leaders are vilified and criticized simply because they work with those most in need. What's even worse is that these racist policies that denigrate our kids are cloaked in this language of a right to a quality education. You know, I'm a public school special education teacher in a junior high, and people often say to me when I tell them what I do for a living, they say, "Oh, bless you," you know, as though my students and I are somehow in need of blessings or sympathy. My students don't need to be blessed. They don't need pity. They don't need sympathy. What my students and I do need is for folks to understand that we have value. Our schools that serve those most in need, they have value. And that value is not based on some arbitrary, or not even arbitrary really, but some racially, culturally, and economically biased so-called uniform achievement standard. Our kids' value is based on the fact that they are people with something to give our community beyond a proficiency score. And the schools and people that serve them are valuable, essential parts of our community that are worthy of our support. They, in fact, have more value because they serve those most in need. All the people that serve our students, not just the literacy teachers, but the bus drivers, the special education assistants, even us board members have value. I mean, that's why we're here, right? Because we believe in this work. We believe that it has value, because we believe in the mission of our public schools to serve our communities. So to people that support this amendment, the sponsors, I'd like to suggest that if they want to help us in the mission that we have, they could maybe advocate for higher taxes on the wealthy, or maybe they could help us to deliver to the promise of special education funding. Or if they have some time, maybe they can come down and fill one of our open truck driver or special ed assistant positions or substitute teacher positions if they think they could do one of those jobs. Unfortunately, we can't pay people enough to fill those positions, and those positions, though they're not highly paid, they represent important parts of public service that is currently known by our Constitution as a public school system. So I know that what we do here is not cheap, and I know it takes a lot of human effort, but you know, our doors are also open to everyone, regardless of their proficiencies. So I don't support the Page Amendment. I do support this resolution. Thank you.
Thank you.